Let me tell you about Van Halen 1.
After changing their name from Mammoth to something in the same vein as Santana, Van Halen started gaining buzz in the LA scene, playing the live circuit in clubs like Whiskey A Go Go and Gazzarri's before they started cutting demos that were initially funded by Gene Simmons. After some retooling of their setup and being discovered by Marshall Burrell, who got them more exposure and eventually got them signed to Warner. Following that, they convened with producer Ted Templeman, who helped them recreate their live sound in a 3-week period in 1977 to create an album that would release to a myriad of success and would help shape the sound of the decade on the horizon. I'm talking about the 1978 classic rock staple that is their self-titled album and a string of self-titled albums and debut, Van Halen.
You know, when I sat down to decide to start doing classic album breakdowns, I didn't think I'd be doing this many tributes to either artists that influenced me and passed on, artists that I looked up to and passed on, or artists that were a part of groups that had passed on. But I've done 4 now. This is my 4th one. You know, Bowie was the first episode. I did The Prodigy. You know, I did Rush, and now I'm doing Van Halen. And, I mean, I'm not a virtuoso guitarist. I wouldn't consider myself a great guitarist by any stretch of the imagination. A kid, modicum of power. But I feel like if you love guitar at any point in your life, if you love rock music, you have liked Van Halen at some point. You've gone through a Van Halen phase, as CJ put it. Because even he posted, and CJ is not the type of guy I would lump in as like a Van Halen fan. But it's clear that, like, if you love guitars, you loved Van Halen at some point in your life. If I'm going to talk about a Van Halen album on its own, it's going to be their debut. Because even though I wasn't alive in 1978, hell, my mom was only 4 at the time, I feel like if you look at what came before and what came after it, you can see where Van Halen took their influence and used it to create something that would influence thousands of guitarists from there on out. You know, from the bluesy influence that they took from bands like Aerosmith to the bombastic rock that they may have drawn influence from bands like Kiss, they just escalated it all to the next level and made one of the tightest rock albums ever made in their debut. You know, I love so much about this record, from Michael Anthony's bass that kicks off the record on Running with the Devil and just acts as a good cementation of it lays a great foundation for the band to play off of, both Alex's super thunderous drums or Eddie's shredderific guitar. His harmonies with David Lee Roth help these hooks escalate to the next level, like on Running with the Devil, or Feel Your Love Tonight, or Jamie's Crying, or Ain't Talk About Love, or hell, pretty much everything on here that has a chorus. I'm the One, the You Really Got Me cover, which also acts as like a great send-off to the old era of rock and helps as a good transition into the future of what rock in this sense would sound like in the 80s. You know, I could even see somebody blaming their great You Really Got Me cover for every shitty 80s cover of an older song that tried to do the same overly bombastic, you know, spin on an older track on that cover. I'm talking about like the shitty Funky Town cover that happened in the 80s. Every shitty, you know, bombastic cover that happened in the 80s, I could see somebody blaming on Van Halen's You Really Got Me cover. This album has hooks for days, and Michael Anthony, to give a showcase to his talents, are a good, you know, like, again, accent to what makes Van Halen, especially Van Halen 1, incredible. You know, David Lee Roth's vocals in general, he has this sort of slick, sleazy way that he sings in a way that feels like, again, an extension of what artists like Gene Simmons and Steven Tyler were doing. You know, his sort of crooning, you know, really belty style stuff is really, you know, again, slick style bleeds through and really well on Atomic Punk, on Ain't Talking About Love, on Ice Cream Man. You know, and Ice Cream Man feels like, again, a great sort of tangent from the blues rock and hard rock in the blues sense that bands like Aerosmith were doing. It has that same kind of groove in like a fast way, you know, or again, tracks like Jamie's Crying. Jamie's Crying feels like an Aerosmith song on steroids in the best way possible, you know. But on top of that, Eddie's guitar, you know, Eddie Van Halen's guitar is what is the biggest component that elevates this album to the next level. And this is not to undersweep Alex Van Halen. Alex Van Halen is one of my favorite drummers. As a drummer, I have a lot of love and respect for that man's talents. And he has some of it shown on here, like the drum work on the drum fills on Eruption, you know, the big bombastic closers on some of these tracks. He gets to show off his skills a bit. It's not like Hot for Teacher, but like he gets to do his thing. You know, he gets to add a flair, playful backbeat to Eddie's playing. But Eddie's playing is certainly, at least especially on this debut, feels like the biggest showcase that the band wanted to throw out there, because it was very influential, and at the time, at least reading and learning a bit about their early years, seemed like the biggest mystery of the band, how Eddie got his guitars to sound the way that they did. His Frankenstein guitar that he made that became a standard in guitar gear setups. You know, the way he got his guitar to sound that way was just so ahead of its time, you know? And again, the playing, that virtuosic playing, and, you know, he wasn't the only one to kind of make a big impact in the scene, but Van Halen's success, I would argue, certainly is what helped throttle it even more into the forefront of rock music. You know, his play style was incredibly influential. And I feel like with this album's success, there were thousands upon thousands of wannabe Van Halens that were born after listening to this record. I mean, say what you want. I mean, the solo work on here, incredible, like on Fire or on the closer of their You Really Got Me cover. But Eruption, I mean, if I'm going to take a second to talk about any moment that showcases Eddie's talents, Eruption. I like the guitar effects on Atomic Punk. Again, they do other cool guitar effect stuff that feels kind of ahead of its time. I love Atomic Punk. I think that guitar crunch is really dope. But Eruption, it still gives me chills when the triplets come in, and it sounds like you're being thrown through a time portal. Like it's transcendental. A song like Eruption is. It's incredible. It's not the only great solo. I'm a big fan of Spanish Fly. I think Spanish Fly is a very underrated guitar solo in Eddie's repertoire. But Eruption just sounds otherworldly. You know, it's got a lot of It's like one of the flashiest things ever. It's like the elevator pitch for Van Halen in a song. You know, because it's just... And it comes next in the record. You know, they started the record off showing their talents as a whole, but then they were like, all right, we know what you're really here for, this. And they just let Eddie shred for a little bit. And it's awesome. You know, even before the triplets come in, when he's just scaling up or he's like playing the rapid fire strum notes. Insane. Like, it's face melting even in 2020. You know, and I feel like if you gave a kid, even now, this album, he would still his mind would be blown. You know, because it's a great introduction to that world. And it's what, again, I think it's what birthed a million wannabes in the best way possible. This album is incredible. Across the board. I love this album. I've already said it, but I feel like it's one of the most influential records of the 70s as far as influencing the 80s. It's not the only one, because I'm sure when Bowie was still doing his stuff and the Talking Heads were coming out, a lot of people maybe saw what other aspects of the 80s would sound like, because they also sounded like really weird for their time. I feel like people looked at Van Halen and were like, no, this makes sense for where rock is going to go, because it just took the foundation, adapted it into something new, and made something incredible out of it. And again, this record's influence is limitless, I feel like. Not just in a playing sort of sense, but just in general, you know. It's an album where you hear the songs everywhere. The You Really Got Me cover was really big for a decent amount of time, even when I was a kid. You know, Jamie's Crying's another, and Talk About Love are two really big singles for them. Again, Eruption is just an iconic moment. So many iconic Van Halen songs in this album. And then they went on to be so incredibly successful from here on out. They shaped the 80s, and they stuck around in it for a while. before taking a break and coming back. And Van Halen's career is incredibly dense, and I'm not going to go over it today. And I'm going to leave that to Crash, because he's dropping a video soon on Van Halen, and I'm going to let him do that. I just wanted to take a minute, talk about Van Halen 1 in tribute to a guy who definitely didn't influence my guitar playing, but opened up the world of guitars for me even farther. And he influenced dudes that I really love a lot. You know, like, I feel like, again, while they didn't study under Van Halen, I feel like dudes like Kirk Hammett, while more being taught and influenced by dudes like Satriani, also probably took a lot of love and notes from Van Halen's playbook. You know, he's a dude whose influence knows no bounds, and it's sad to see him go. He was a great guitarist, and definitely this record is worth your time if you like rock music and haven't listened to it. But those are my thoughts on Van Halen 1. What did you think about it? What do you think about this record? Do you like it? Do you not? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this particular video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community. It's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, situations, and I'll see you another day.